Hello, everyone. Thanks and welcome to the session today. So this is the session for the large-scale redesign of assessment in the UK and Spain. I'm Jonathan San Diego from King's College London, and I'm one of the Center for Distance Education Fellows. I'll be chairing the session today. Just a bit of Zoom housekeeping. There is a Q&A button, so please feel free to use that one if you want to ask a question. But we also have a chat button, and on that chat button, you can either communicate among yourselves. There's an option there to either communicate to all the panelists and to all the attendees as well. But you can ask your questions here, and we'll read them. So there'll be two presentations today, one from Professor Simon Walker and Professor Norbert Pachler, and they'll be presenting on exploring the frontiers of digital assessment. Simon is the academic lead of UCL Arena Center for Research-Based Education. He supports the educational enhancement across UCL and leading the educational strategy initiatives on assessment and feedback and program design. Prior to joining the UCL, he was the head of the education development of the University of Greenwich, where he led a wide range of university policies and strategies. He's an expert in the field of digital education and learning design, and he will be co-presenting with him is Professor Norbert Pachler, and he's the Vice Provost of Digital Education at UCL. And Norbert leads on a number of UCL-wide initiatives, particularly in the area of e-learning, technology-enhanced learning, and digital education, including a pilot on fully online postgraduate taught provision. His main research area of interest includes mobile learning, teacher education, and development language education. I'll be introducing the next presenter after Norbert's and Simon's presentation. So they have 30 minutes, so over to you, Simon and Norbert. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so we will be running this in Mentimeter, but just there'll be slides right at the end, so you can kind of relax, sit back. Obviously, ask us questions in the chat or the Q&A. But what we would like to do, given this is a sort of after lunch, you've managed to break from the day and have some lunch amongst all the other sort of work stuff that everyone's always involved in. Sit back and enjoy and engage as much as you can do. We'll post this into this number into the chat as well, but you can either use Mentimeter on your phone, of course, through the app, or on a browser window. So just to kind of by way of sort of introduction, and Norbert and I are going to sort of box and cox these slides. But I think sort of after a year of lockdown measures, we've been, all of us, I think, have been challenged with transforming very long established assessment processes at speed and at scale, as we've already heard from Stelianos and Linda and Alan and others. And colleagues have raced to work out what's possible, what's desirable, what's fair. And I think it's true to say that we've all taken a number of different approaches, depending on our temporary operating models that were decided back in March, but also our longer term sort of digital trajectories and our expectations and our ambitions, if indeed they exist. My sense is that every approach involved trade-offs. So, should we place higher value on trustworthiness and possibly risk the sort of quality assurance and equity that brings about? Or do we focus on innovation and trials and piloting different things and accept that sort of trustworthiness of assessment may be less rigorous? But I think in terms of our presentation today, what we wanted to do really was to share some of the experiences of shifting, a sort of a lift and shift, if you like, of our centrally managed exams as a kind of minimum viable sort of product approach into a digital assessment platform, but also look at some of the kind of issues that's bringing about and what that kind of means for us. And we'd really like, as I mentioned, to engage with you to gather your sort of ideas and make some of those ideas available so we can share as a community as we move forward. So back in 2019, UCL, this slide here I'm showing you, looked like our assessment, our exams system. We rent the Excel Centre in the East End for 5-6 weeks at a time at great cost, and we throw students into that, and it's all kind of invigilated, all on pens and paper, using pens and papers. And of course, what we've done now is we've changed that dramatically. Almost to the day 1 year ago, we've been thinking about this sort of shift towards a more contemporary digital assessment environment, but thinking this is going to take a long time in an institution which is really quite traditional and quite conservative. But so shifting that we thought was going to take a very, very long time to change. And then COVID came along and accelerated that whole process. And so a year ago today, we had our first kind of kickoff meeting, really thinking about, okay, what do we want from this digital assessment platform, at the same time as we were sort of looking at the contingency of moving assessments into a remote environment. Okay, so just to go over some of the aims of this, of what we wanted in terms of the sort of long-term trajectory around digital assessment, was that we realized that we needed a kind of a technical fix. Really, we needed something that was dedicated, and we've been using Moodle as our contingency. That worked well. We bolstered our Moodle, but we realized it's not designed as an assessment platform. There's lots of great things about Moodle, but things that clearly weren't going to work very well. And I think the main issue around that was just ensuring that it was a kind of a rigorous, we could perform rigorous assessments on this platform that was not going to fall over at all, as well as looking at some of the other enhancements that we could produce remotely. And then as we move forward, given that UCL is very much kind of face-to-face, and we're branding ourselves on that face-to-face education, when students come back, we can continue to kind of modernize that assessment. One of the main benefits that we saw was the integration with our student records management system. We use SITS, and that, you know, when you think about the number of assessments that we do every year, it's absolutely colossal. I say we've got a very high assessment volume there. And just trying to work, you know, the sort of administration of doing that, manually doing that, is huge. So we knew that the way in which to sell this, if you like, to academics was partly to do, actually we can integrate, you know, the grades directly into our student management information system. And then thinking more pedagogically, you know, what can we really do to shift assessment? And I think we heard in the last presentation by Stelianos and Linda and Alan about the sorts of thoughts that we may be having really about how do we enhance assessment? What are we doing around that in that space, and how do we shift colleagues and support colleagues to make that shift if they haven't already made that shift? Just thought we'd just throw something up about, you know, what you can do on the new platform. You can do kind of all these things, but also you can do these either formative or summative. You can also combine these things, and you can do, you know, bits and pieces of these things, which we think is really sort of opens things out a lot. Obviously, there's a whole range of different types of assessments within each of these as well. So these are kind of major methods. And you can do these either sort of remotely in open browsers as kind of open book, or you can do these in lockdown browsers where students can bring their own devices in. I think one of the things that it has, the sort of the technical approach of introducing this new platform, and we have done that. We did that within the year. We've run it for centrally managed exams, which are over. We've done staff survey and the student survey, and it was looking very, very positive in the same way that I think CDE has reported as well. But it did also allow us to look at the kind of the complete assessment journey from sort of end to end, and to attempt to get some sort of coherence and some consistency. So even though we've got academic regulations, with this assessment platform, there are other things that we now need to think about in terms of the functions about that. So that's a piece of work which we hope has been positive in terms of getting everybody kind of on board to understand if you're using the platform, these are all the things you've got to think of, and it kind of goes round in this cycle. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Norbert for the next few slides then.
Thank you, Simon. As Simon's background shows, it's all been a breeze, or has it? So what happened one year on? So we've procured the platform. We've had, a significant number of exams and assessment successfully delivered remotely on and through the platform, with a large number of candidatures across a large number of students, with a very good set of submission rates. We've run a lot of market training sessions, which were well attended. Colleagues engaged with video guidance. There was a lot of marking on the platform, and we obviously learned and gained a lot. I think one of the questions Simon and I are starting to ask ourselves, whether we've sort of been becoming victims of our own success and driving a lot of formal examinations onto the platform, and what does that mean in terms of our ambitions around really ensuring that assessment is an integral part of teaching and learning and reflects our aspirations as articulated in program and module level learning outcomes. So the big question, as for the next slide, Simon, is, is everything well? Clearly, we're immensely proud of the success of what has been achieved, and what we're now very keen on, I think, Simon, is to really build on that and continue to enable colleagues to explore the full range of functionality within the platform, so we don't sort of rely on one particular type of assessment going forward. So what does that mean? So in many ways, I think we're asking ourselves the question of what should and what does the future hold for us. And arguably, there's this quote from The Economist, which suggests the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So you can obviously look at that in many ways. You can look at it in terms of within the field of education, to what extent does our use of digital technologies within our broader education endeavor mirror the sophistication of their use within assessment. But of course, you can ask the question more broadly and say, is education really sort of at the cutting edge of how digital transformation is starting to impact on society and on the economy and all sorts of endeavors out there? So if we look, for example, at the ways in which artificial intelligence and other things are starting to impact on the world of work and students' future careers and so forth. What does all of that tell us for as assessment? So arguably, as Lovendal argues, assessment is one of the final digital frontiers in education. I think we recognize that it holds significant potential to transform in a positive way. Arguably, education has been slow to execute in this area, and this is clearly something we are trying to address. So that then leads us to the question of, where do we want to be, say, 2 years from now? And here are some of the issues, some of the targets that we've set for ourselves. Work on the platform take up, ensure that grows, and that onboarding across departments grows and becomes easier. That digital assessment teams are in place centrally. So the university is currently investing in a number of staff to really work with and support colleagues out in program teams, in departments and in faculties, and Simon's excellent thought leadership in terms of our assessment approach. This is incidentally something that's worked really, really well for us in terms of our COVID mitigation approach. We put in place faculty technology leads in each of our each of our faculties, and that proved to be really transformational in terms of the skills base at a local level, and we're hoping that strengthening our digital assessment team and the central guidance will have a similarly transformational effect. It's the first time, I think, really in earnest, Simon, that sort of online marking has been undertaken at scale at UCL this year, and there's clearly enhancements we want to make to that to improve the process for staff and to ensure that their aspirations can be realized as much as possible. And clearly, as has been alluded to in the previous talk, there is the need to develop our thinking in the policy realm about collusion and cheating. UCL is not keen on going down any sort of proctoring route in any big way, because we're very concerned about the ethical considerations. So we really want to work up a robust policy environment that allows us to deal with any possible challenges there. And we want to develop new ideas for assessment using digital affordances. And before I hand back to Simon, I think, again, picking up on what's been said by the previous speakers just now, one of the key things we want to do is we want to leverage authenticity in our assessment. And here's a quote that's a little bit dated, but I think is still really, really pertinent. I think we ought to be exploring how we can make or increase the degree of authenticity in our assessment by leveraging the affordances of digital technologies to ensure that we don't just sort of work off indirect or poor proxies, but that we really give students tasks that require them to perform acquired knowledge and apply it, that mirror the priorities and the challenges that are often an integral part of good instructional activities, that enable them to really demonstrate their capability in line with the module and program level learning outcomes. That's real world in many ways, and that prepares them for dealing with the sort of messiness, if you like, of adult and professional life through what again Wiggins sort of calls in his piece, which I strongly recommend to you, ill-structured challenges. So that's, I think, one area that we really want to work on. Simon, back to you.
Lovely, thank you very much, Norbert. And yeah, so as Norbert mentioned, we're looking for sort of new ideas. How do we take our colleagues forward? How do we support them in thinking about these new ideas, particularly at a time, I think, when they are, they're tired. They've moved lots of their teaching so online. They're now trying to work out. Well, we're all trying to work out, I suppose, what happens in September, and all those kind of issues, I think, which is probably adding to a difficult, challenging time ahead for next year. And probably the last thing they want to hear is, actually, let's have a look at your learning outcomes. Let's see about changing the assessments generally. So sort of indebted to Sally Brown and Kay Samble really for some really great sort of work that they've been doing actually over quite a few years, thinking about how do we change our assessment, and just to kind of as a work sort of case study to get our sort of our thought processes and our imaginations going, which I think is we've been quite constrained often by our own kind of experience of assessment and learning. Is, you know, an example from psychology. This might have been a traditional sort of end of term exam, possibly even sort of relating back to a module or a course that you did in the autumn term, but you're actually not going to take it until much later, and sort of having to go back over a lot of kind of stuff, which we know that students don't enjoy very much. So in terms of this sort of question there, you know, discuss the ways in which intergroup conflict can arise and be reduced within a community using psychological theories. What is that really testing? How is that being, you know, how could we change that? What are we really looking for in that question? So here we've Sally and Kay have suggested, well, here, what about producing a scenario as a means of thinking through that, helping our students to think through something which is much more kind of real for them, real world for them. So, you know, so to get yourself into that kind of mode of thinking that actually you are at work now in this local housing association, and you're trying to do something that's going to draw upon the kind of theories that you've had and some of the conversations that you've had as part of your kind of learning, but also your own kind of creativity that you've had there. So that's the kind of the scenario there. And so what we've tended to do here, what we thought about doing here, was thinking about, okay, well, what does that, how can we translate that into something which is sort of interlinked, which is well balanced, which has got variety in it, which uses the kind of digital affordances that Norbert mentioned there. So we thought, well, okay, you know, there's a relationship between the formative and summative there. We know that formative is often kind of underused in many institutions and programs. So we thought, well, let's think about using a digital Pechakucha for doing something. We've certainly used those in the past. That can be a kind of a group activity or an individual activity. You can have people working together, commenting on that, building that, and then thinking about something that you might write in order to support that work and resolving that particular conflict. And then thinking about, okay, the relationship between that and the summative, where you combine those things. So you have to do them, in other words, because you're asking, you know, you will be assessing that work. So it's not about, I'm going to do this or not do this. It's formative, which is actually you have to do it. But again, thinking about, well, let's use it as a kind of video report. This is kind of real life stuff. Our students these days are used to using that. An annotated reference list, again, sort of thinking about the digital skills development they would do. So modeling some of those, the sort of practices that they may well find themselves using out there, and then just a personal reflection. So we think that that's probably a much more authentic task than having that end of year exam. Okay, so what we would really like to do then is to facilitate a discussion now. We've got a couple of questions there for you. I'll show you the two questions there. So this is the second question about sort of the benefits, the implications and barriers that might be there. But we'll start with this first question, which is really thinking about sort of, you know, do you have particular ideas that you would like to share with this group about ways in which you've come across or you yourselves have experimented with to move that, to move your kind of more exam-based stuff into something which is more real, more authentic, more digital. So this is the code itself is 696086.8. I don't know if anybody could write that into the chat, 696086.8, and we can see anything which comes up from that, if anybody, but also if anybody, I'm not sure if anyone can take the mic, if anybody would prefer to talk, really happy to have your thoughts and views on that. Is that possible, Jonathan? Can people take the mic in this session or not?
Go ahead, John.
Sorry, no, I don't think they can, but we
Okay.
have about 3 questions that came through in the Q&A.
Ah, okay. Let me have it.
Do you want to take that now? The questions?
Yeah, by all means, as people are there, yeah, for sure.
So we have a question from Yue, and the question is the new assessment platform off the shelf or a bespoke developed or a mixture of both?
No, shall I take that one?
Please do.
Yeah, so it's off the shelf, but it was interesting, the whole tendering process. We ended up doing this huge kind of technical specifications gathering, functional, non-functional, across the whole university. It was a very, very sort of collaborative effort, I have to stress that. And what we realized was actually the market is reasonably kind of mature in terms of what these platforms can do, but also very immature in terms of the kind of some of the things we really want it to do. I think one of the problems of having a kind of off the shelf is that it's a single product, and so any roadmap of development has got to involve all the kind of partners. But the supplier that we chose, we partly chose because they were so kind of responsive to thinking through the developments. So whilst we think that the environment for students is fantastic, it's a really nice environment to go and take your assessments in. It's very easy to use. You've got accessibility tools. You can model. You can move. You can sort of adapt the environment to that. What we realized very early on was that the marker journey is not brilliant. It's still quite clunky, I think. It's not as, it doesn't use AI in terms of sort of grouping assessments. We know that, I remember, my time as an academic, I used to really not look forward to marking. So anything you can make to the marker journey is going to be better. But there are lots of other things which are there. So things around the sort of some of the digital affordances in terms of, doing orals, putting up videos, taking photographs of documents, very large file uploads, all those things can do work very, very effectively.
Thanks, Simon. You still have 2 more minutes, so we either go for another question, or I think something came through to your Mentimeter there. But I'll read one from Stilianos Hatzipanaga. So, where do you position exams in your vision for the future? Do they need to be replaced, or they are here to stay?
Shall I have a go at that, Simon?
Yeah.
So I think we clearly recognize the importance of exams in our current setup, not just at UCL, but in many universities. And therefore, we want to support colleagues who make a deliberate and positive choice to use examinations. We want to engage them, and Simon is leading for us on that, of course, at the stage of program development and program revalidation, in conversations around the most appropriate assessment types relative to the learning outcomes stipulated. And we are absolutely certain that exams will continue to feature in the types being used. But we would also want to use a wider range of assessment modes. And as you could see on this one of the slides that Simon talked to early on, we've deliberately chosen a platform that can accommodate a wide range of different assessment types. We're particularly keen also to be able to support practice-based activities through our platform. So it's a matter over time to ensure that programs are using the most appropriate assessment types and methods relative to their needs, and then for us to be able to support them technologically rather than the other way around.
Thanks, Norbert. I'll just read one more last question, and then we'll go to the next presentation. So another question from Malsha. What about modules such as accounting? How feasible authentic assessments would be for such modules?
Yeah, thanks. It's also a great question. So I think this is, where this. By the way, if you interact with the Mentimeter, you'll get that back, so you can share. You can see what's kind of the what people have written. I mean, I think we're still kind of trying to work out what this means for each of the each of the different disciplines. And I think it's about trying to kind of free up the imagination, really. So we know that there are some, you know, some things that you can do around, you know, use of kind of, you know, technology, sort of VR technology and gaming and all those other things. But actually, there's more sort of, I think there are more, I said more standard things that we could do, again, in terms of the assessment design. So things like, you know, if you're thinking about the professional life of an accountant, what you might be finding is that an accountant will go through all those kind of functions and performing all those functions that's required. But there may be things around throwing in sort of live data. So as they're doing, you know, A2 exam online, remotely, or in, you know, invigilated in person using the device, you could throw in some live data. Again, that would kind of help with you know, with avoiding sort of collusion and things like that. So there are things, I think, that in terms of the timings even, that we could start thinking about. You could change, yeah, just change the data, or throw in another question about, what if this changed? What would you do then? So it's testing other things, and I think it's relating back to, you know, the real life, I suppose, of a professional.
Thank you very much, Simon and Norbert. Thanks for sharing your experiences about your new assessment platform and some of your practices at UCL. I'm afraid we have to move on to the next presentation now. And our next presentation is on changing assessment in a distance education university, students and faculty perspectives, from Professor Ines Jaurena. And Ines is a professor in the Faculty of Education at the National Distance Education University of Spain. And her research is in intercultural education, e-learning, and distance education, to mention a few. And she's also the current editor for Open Praxis, a peer-reviewed open access scholarly journal published by the International Council for Open and Distance Education. Ines, over to you.
Well, welcome and good afternoon to everybody. I'm going to present about our experience in the change in the assessment methods we had to experience since last year, and that has lasted up to now. We are still using the same online assessment system that we started using last year. And this is the outline of my presentation. If you could attend the previous session about this study at the Center for Distance Education by Linda and Stylianos and Alan, I think we share a lot of commonalities. But one of the differences is that this is not an institutional study. What I'm going to present, it's a study that we have undertaken by a group of professors, and one of my colleagues, Daniel Dominguez, is also attending the seminar. So it's not an institutional study, but it comes from a concern of ourselves as professors in our intention or interest to improve our teaching, and to see what was going on last year when all the pandemic changed our assessment methods. And first I will give an overview of my university, UNED, and I will focus on the assessment and the change we experience, and then share with you our analysis of the impact of this change in the students' performance, some information about the students' perceptions from a survey we developed last year, and also some more informal faculty perspectives and what would be our next steps. Well, UNED is, if you don't know it, is the Spanish Distance Education University. It would be similar, but it is different, but similar to the Open University UK. It was in fact created in the same year, in the 70s. And our faculty is based in Madrid, that's where I am. But we have regional centers distributed across Spain, and you can see the map there. Also, the Canary Islands are not there, but we also have regional centers in the Canary Islands. And also we have support centers and examination centers abroad in Europe and Latin America, and also in Guinea, Equatorial Guinea. Our teaching method, it's all distance mode. So we have an online platform where the students can find their resources and interact with the faculty and upload their assignments, etc. And we also have voluntary face-to-face that in the last year have been online sessions with tutors that can guide and support the students during all the semester. But our exams have been always on site in the regional centers. So this is what changed last year. And to give you some figures, we are the largest university in Spain. Last year, we had more than 125,000 students enrolled in the bachelor degree programs. And this year, we had even more. So during the pandemic, we had more students registered, especially in some programs. For instance, the philosophy bachelor program had a big increase of students this year. This is something curious. And we also offer master, doctorate, continuing education programs, language programs, etc. But in this presentation, I will focus on the 28 bachelor degree programs that we offer, and it's the biggest amount of the students are in those programs. So now going into the assessment, overall, all the bachelor degree program courses, the assessment is based mainly, normally 80% of the final score is a final exam. And there is a continuing assessment supported by the tutors in the regional centers, which usually is about 20%. This may change between courses, but this would be the average in the bachelor degree courses. And both before the pandemic and after or during the pandemic, all the exams, the final exams take place at the same time for the students. So they are in a fixed moment and they have a same duration. It's usually between 1 and 2 hours. And the type of exams is diverse. So multiple choice question exams, especially in the first year courses when there are more students enrolled. Short questions like those presented in the previous presentation, short reflective questions or essay type questions with a limited number of words, problem solving, etc. And this has been the same, so this diversity in the examination types, both in the on-site exams and in the online exams. But going to the differences between these two modalities that you can see in the table, until February last year, which was the last on-site exams in my university, the exams were face-to-face, normally with no materials allowed. Students couldn't have anything in the table. And the control measures were identification before entering, also invigilation in the classroom. And the students are allocated in the seats so they are not seated behind someone from the same course. So it's more difficult to talk to a student from the same course. And since June last year, well, the university had to adapt all the final examination method to online to guarantee that all the students could be assessed. And the university, in a record time, or well, it was really a challenge, developed its own platform called AVEX, Aula Virtual de Exámenes, which means virtual exam classroom. You can see the link there if you want to have a look. It worked well since the beginning. This was really something everybody was fear because it was the first experience, and we have been using it since then in the different calls in September 2020, December and February 2021. This month, June, the exams had just took place last week, and we will use it also in September. And we still don't know what will happen next year. And the differences were that in some courses, and it was an individual decision each course or each professor had to make, and they could allow students to use material like the readings of the course, for instance, during the exam. And this is something, for instance, I did in my course. And the control measures in this online exams platform is, well, identification. also photos during the exam. Also questions randomization, both for multiple choice and for short questions. So the professors prepare different questions and the system picks some of them. So different questions for each student, different combinations of questions. And also the system has integrated an anti-plagiarism check system. So what happened last year? We were curious about what was the impact of this new assessment type in the students' performance. So we analyzed 4 indicators, and you can see in this graph the overview of these rates since 2015 until last year, and you can see that all the indicators increase when we use the online assessment. So let's go to analyze them one by one. To me, the main indicator is the assessment rate, which is among those students enrolled in a course, how many of them take the exam, so get assessed at the end. And this is especially relevant in distance education because, well, as you will know that the dropout rates in distance education are higher than in face-to-face universities. So for us, it's very relevant that the assessment rates increase last year due to when the online assessment was used. And you can see the increase of the assessment rates in each bachelor degree, each of the 28 bachelor degrees. And these lines represent the increase. So in all the degrees, and this is an average for all the courses in 1 degree, so it's a very aggregated results, but you can see all the assessment rates increased, even in those degrees that had very low assessment rates, which are usually engineering and science bachelor degrees. They had also an increase in the number of students who finally get assessed, and this is significant for us. Also, the success rate increased, and the success rate is the number of students who passed the exam. So who had in Spain, we use the score is from 0 to 10, and to pass the exam, you need a minimum score of 5. So those who had minimum 5 score in the exam, among those who were assessed only. So this is the success rate, and it also increased in all the degrees. And the achievement rate, which is a combination of the previous 2 rates. So students who pass the exam among those enrolled, this also increased logically. And this is also relevant for the impact it can have on retention of students, that if they have achieved, they can register the next semester. And considering the average mark of score or score in the bachelor degree, there was also an increase. So the scores were higher last year in June than the average of all the previous years. In some cases, it was like in this electrical engineering, the average mark increased it was very low increase, but in other degrees it was significant, like criminology, 1.5 points among them higher. I didn't say it, but I teach in the degree of social education, so we also had an increase in all the rates. So these results were really interesting for us, and I will tell you later, but we want to check what happened this year now that the online assessment system is more established. So is this the same this year? These rates are maintained, or is there a decrease more similar to previous rates? So what happened? We will continue with the study. And we also had we prepared the survey last year also to see how the students had lived this new experience, because we could anticipate that it was also very stressful for them, as it was for us. For us as a faculty, it was a challenge to go into the online assessment system, but also for the students. So we prepared the survey to ask about their experience, and we got 714 responses from students from 20 of the 28 bachelor degrees. Most of them were from our own degree or the degrees offered by the Faculty of Education, where we are based, but we had students from different degrees. And for most of them, it was their first online exam experience. Despite being in a distance education university, the online final exam was not common until now. And in general, they didn't have any connection or access to technology problems, so they could undertake the exams without any technical or technological problem. And well, we did different questions in the survey, but I will just highlight some of them. And one is that given that the assessment rates increased, so more students took the final exam, we asked if the fact that the exams were online had influenced their decisions to take the exam. And most of them said it didn't have an influence, but some of them, almost 25% said it encouraged them to take the exam. So this percentage may be those that were not going to take the exam if it was face-to-face, and it can explain the increase in the assessment rate. But in general, it didn't have a specific influence on their decision to take the exam. And also, we asked them if they thought the online exams were easier than the face-to-face ones, and clearly they said that they were not easier. Here, we find some interesting responses from different courses, because some courses there were a lot of complaints that the exam was extremely more difficult than in previous years when it was online, and in other cases they didn't appreciate significant differences in being it more difficult or not. So considering this question, and that the average mark increased when the exam was online, the students don't think it was easier, but they got better results. So we would need more information to interpret this aspect. And the final question I wanted to highlight is that we explicitly asked what assessment method do they prefer for taking the final exam. And more than 50% said that they prefer the online exam. Other 40% face-to-face exam, and 6% said other type of assessment, and this includes no exam, but assignments or other options that were not just the final exam, like it has been raised by other presentations, like if the final exams are the only option. And also we had an open-ended question, and some of the things that we found interesting is that many of them were considering that the time for the exam was not enough. It's true that the time for the online exam was reduced comparing to the face-to-face exam, and these were some guidelines from the university. So some courses reduced the time. For instance, if the face-to-face exam was 2 hours long, they reduced it to 1.5 hours or to 1 hour. And some students were complaining about the timing. Also, there were anxiety problems before doing the exam, like students concerned if they would have connection problems or any technical issue, or if they would be lost in the software or in the platform. But at the end, the experience was better than they expected. And we have differentiated between the reasons the students have given when they say they prefer the online exams and when they say they prefer the face-to-face exam. Those who prefer the online exams, they say their reasons are a very relevant one is the distance to the examination center. Some students have to travel quite far to go to the regional center, so it was much easier for them to take the exam from home or from work. Also, they say they prefer it because the platform was easy to use and it worked, so they had a good experience. And for those who prefer the face-to-face exam, it was more not so directed to the exam in itself, but to the conditions. Like, well, the experience, that first experience they had, specifically in some courses when, as I mentioned, that the exam was more difficult, or they think it was not enough time, or maybe they didn't have a good place for doing the exam. Like if they had to do it at work and there were more people around, etc. Then we didn't make any like formal study about faculty perspectives, but we have had informal conversation with many faculty, and also we had a forum for all the faculty of the UNED, and there were two common, more common concerns that also have been mentioned by previous presenters. One is about the academic integrity and plagiarism, which I don't think it's a majority of the students who had these misbehaviors, but when it happens, it's very noisy, like it's and very disappointing. So there is concern about academic integrity and plagiarism, and also the increase in the workload. For marking, because we have, with bigger assessment rates, we have more exams to mark, to grade, a lot more, I would say. And also the workload for designing exams that would be more authentic and that would avoid plagiarism. So we needed to also develop some skills as faculty to design better exams, that, for instance, exams that could be prepared with material allowed for the students. That would be a difference with regards to on-site exams. And also here it was very helpful to receive the UNED guidelines for exam design, and we received like written guidelines, and also we had different webinars throughout the year where some different faculty from different areas were sharing their experience with very specific examples of assessment and type of questions, etc. And these are the guidelines we received from the UNED. The recommendation for the open book exams, because it's very difficult to control really if the students are using the materials or not when they are in front of the camera, and to have a big database of questions for randomization, and to have more complex and more authentic assessment questions in the exams, not so many questions based just on remembering or reproducing the content of the course, and to adjust the duration of the exam, so to reduce it so the students can focus on the exam and they don't have time to try to do things that they shouldn't be doing, like communicating with students outside, for instance. Finally, our next steps, well, this year, now we are finalizing the second semester. We want to continue the analysis we did last year, and to check what happened with the performance rates, if it is a trend that is maintained or if we are returning to previous rates. Also, we will replicate a survey to students with some slight changes to incorporate some new questions. And we want to also explore the more faculty perspectives. Also, we, of course, are dependent of the institutional decision from the university about what will happen next year, if we will go back to the on-site exams as before the pandemic, if we will be we will have the two systems coexisting. We will keep the online examination, and we still don't know about what will happen in next year. But in any case, as faculty, we are concerned, at least in the courses we teach, to take different actions to rethink and redesign the overall assessment process, like to have maybe different balance in the weight of the final examination and the continuing evaluation. And here there is a pilot program in the universities promoting to remember we had a 80% final exam, 20% a continuous assessment, and the university is promoted to have 60% final exam and 40% weight in the final score of the continuing assessment. And also the use of diverse assessment methods and the design of final exams that I think in our case, given the large number of students we have, I find it difficult to remove the final exams, really, but we can design final exams to better assess learning and also try to reduce the workload, especially for during the marking and grading time. That is really quite heavy workload. So thank you for your attention. You have my contact here in case you want to ask me anything afterwards, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ines. I'm afraid we only have 1 minute, so I'm only going to read one of the questions here. Or do you have a preference? Can you see them? Or
yeah, I see them. Well, there is one, if the assessment rates increase because the students didn't have to travel. I think it's one of the reasons. I think it was more comfortable for the students and easier than before just to take the exams from home. At that time, when the exams took place in June last year, in Spain, we were still in the lockdown, so everybody was, or most of the people was at home. And I think it was quite easy for them just to go and take the exam, even if they had not studied so much. So it was easier, but the results were good. So yeah, definitely the no need to travel to the regional center was mentioned by some of them. Why the exams were made in a face-to-face? Yeah, this is something that it was a requirement by the Ministry of Education and Universities in Spain, that now it is changing, but before, the only way the ministry considered we had to control identity of the students was to have also in all the online and distance education degrees in my university and in others, to have face-to-face on-site exams when we could guarantee by ID card, etc., that they were those students who were taking the exam. So it was a requirement. Now there is a new recommendation, not an obligation, that we have to be moving to online assessment, but controlling also identity and guaranteeing this quality.
That was the answer to the question why the exams were made in a face-to-face environment. Yeah. We can take one last one.
Yeah, can we have guest access to the platform? I don't know, I don't think so, but there is in the site I mentioned, you can see, I think it is translated into English, and you can see some contact information. Maybe you can ask if they can let you check, because also other organizations and ministries and have used that. So it has been used beyond my university for final exams, also for other like public servant examinations in some ministries. They have used this ABEX platform.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all our presenters today. I think we've learned a lot from your assessment practices. I'm afraid we are now 4:02, and this is now the chance for you to have a break. We have a 15-minute break, and I hope you will still join us in the next invited talks of the Research in Dental Distance Education Conference. So in 15 minutes at 4:15, the invited talks around rethinking teaching and learning, and there are good presenters there from University of London and Chief Content Officer at Coursera. So please do join that. So for those who are willing to stay, please do, and we'll answer some of your questions. But Ines and Simon and Norbert, you can answer the question as well by typing the answers to those questions in the chat if you want to. Thank you all the presenters, and it's really great. Thank you all.